Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our Birds of Newfoundland series. Glad to have you all here tonight. We look like we have a bit of a smaller crowd, but maybe some folks will join us later on. We'll see. Tonight, of course, we're talking about sparrows, finches, and grosbeaks. And for anyone who's new here, my name is Jenna McDermott. Catherine Dale is also here monitoring the chat and helping out with any issues that pop up. And we both work for an organization called Birds Canada. If I can switch my slide. There we are. Birds Canada is a nonprofit organization that is Canada-wide, and our mission is to drive action to increase the understanding, appreciation, and conservation of birds in Canada. So that's not a thing that we just do on our own with our staff. This is something that we have different programs across the country where citizen scientists can get involved in conservation as well through our programs. And citizen scientists, for those who are not aware of the term, just means regular members of the public, like those of you who are here tonight, getting involved by becoming volunteers in programs that are interesting to you, and then you can help collect data and funnel that into these programs that we have where we can then use that information to conserve birds. So each year in Canada, we have over 74,000 people who are enrolled in our programs and share their love of birds and their time and their bird observations with us. And it's really wonderful the amount of manpower that this sort of organization can provide for conservation. So right now in Newfoundland, we have only been here for around 4 years or so, and we run two different programs. The first one is the Newfoundland Breeding Bird Atlas, and this is a 5-year program. We're going into our 5th year right now, so it's a big year for us. And this atlas is mapping the distribution and the abundance of all of the birds that breed on the island of Newfoundland. So if you take a look at that dark-eyed junco there, you'll see the map on the right-hand side of all of the places that it's been recorded so far in the last 4 years where it's been breeding in Newfoundland. So the different color squares indicate a different level of confidence that it's actually breeding and raising young in a certain area. And this is a combination of information from our staff as well as members of the public who submit these observations to us, and so then it shows up on this lovely map. This is a program that anybody can become involved with. So if you like to watch birds or are just, of course, getting into birds as well, you can also provide information to this program that can help populate this map as well. So if you have a junco, for example, nesting on your propane tank in the backyard, something that we've heard about before, then that's information that can be really helpful to us and is something that we'd love for you to join the Atlas for and share your data with us. The other program that we run in Newfoundland, this is for Newfoundland and Labrador, is the Atlantic Nocturnal Owl Survey. And that one's starting up actually pretty soon. It goes from the beginning of April to the 15th of May. And this is another citizen science project. I'm getting program and project mixed up in my head. And people can adopt a route, which is a roadside survey. You just drive it one evening in the early spring, as I mentioned, April and May. And you stop at 10 different stops where you play a playback and listen to hear what owls are calling back to you. So it's pretty cool, really fun to hear some owls out there. And if you're interested in getting involved with that, email Catherine. She can put her email in the chat, and she'll be happy to put you on a route or make you a new route if you're somewhere that doesn't have anything already. Okay. I would also like to acknowledge that the lands that we are running these programs on and that we live and work are the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk people and the unceded traditional territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq people. And these people have been protecting and, of course, stewarding the land here since time immemorial. And we are just hoping to add to that stewardship by running these programs and sort of getting involved with the land as well and trying to protect all the species that we share this island with. So if you're interested in looking up what lands, Indigenous lands you're living on, take a look at that website down at the bottom. It's a really great place to start learning about that. And just lastly, before we get into our species for the evening, I'd like to thank all of our partners and funders. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to put on webinars like this for free. And so thanks to all of these folks, and I hope that I have all the ones on here tonight. Okay. So tonight, of course, as I mentioned, and as you know, since you signed up, we are talking about sparrows, grosbeaks, and finches tonight. And so this is our list that we'll be going through. I think there's around 20 species or so. As usual, we'll be showing adults in breeding plumage that breed on the island of Newfoundland. And for a lot of the species here tonight, males and females actually look the same. So most of these, or a fair amount of the slides, actually only have one picture because males and females look the same. And in cases where they look different, I will show both of them as usual. So let's talk about the family of sparrows to start as a sort of general idea. These are all the species we'll see tonight, but no need to get into their ID right this second. They're just so you can get a broad look at them together. As you can see, they all look kind of similar. They're mostly brown, often streaky, and so sparrows can be quite a difficult family to learn to identify. And they're ones that can trip up people who are experts, people who've been watching birds for years and years and years, especially if you're not getting a really nice look close up in this sort of picture form like we have here. Sparrows are really good at hiding. They're very sneaky. They often are hiding in the bottom of shrubs, hopping around on the ground, and will just pop out, sing maybe, and they are usually flying in sort of a straight line from one point to another. So sometimes it's difficult to get a really good look at them. But generally, they're a pretty small bird, smaller than a robin, for example, bigger than a chickadee. As you can see from their bill shape here, take a look at all of those bills. They look nearly the same. So they're short and conical, and they're using them for crushing open the shells of seeds or small nuts kind of thing. So they're using that for a little crushing mechanism. The sexes look alike, so males and females have the same plumage. And because they are generally pretty brown and sort of streaky, things that we are going to be looking for to distinguish species apart are markings specifically on the breast area, markings on the face or head. And once you've gotten a chance to get more familiar with all of these species, song can also be really helpful for telling the species apart. Okay. So when we're talking about facial markings, we've used some of these terms before throughout the webinars, but I thought I'd just take a second to sort of point out the different parts of the face of a bird and what we call them. So we have the crown is the top of the head. It's often a different color. We have the supercilium, which is a fancy word for that eyebrow stripe. It often can go all the way back down the neck. We have the eye line, which is that line that goes behind the eye and can sometimes extend in front of the eye as well. We have the lores, which is the patch just above the bill. We have the auriculars, which is sort of a cheek patch. This is a lot of names. You don't need to, we're not having a test on these, so you don't need to memorize that, but just handy to know some of them. We have the mustachial stripe, which you can imagine a bird having mustaches might have a stripe going down by the neck. And then I'll put these last two up. This big dark patch that goes down from the neck is called the malar stripe. And then the patch right above it is the malar. So that's sort of the main the main markings on the face that we're looking for variation in or different colors in. For sparrows, but also for all birds. Oh, and then the throat. Sorry, the throat is often a different color as well, or pale. Oh my goodness, another one. And the nape, which is the back of the neck. Okay, that's really all of them now. When we look to the top of the head, we can see a lot of the time that there are stripes along the crown. So those can be split up into the median crown stripe and the lateral crown stripe. And that's just the middle and the side one. I'm not going to talk about those terms too much tonight, I don't think, but also good to just have in your back pocket. Okie dokie. So let's start with our first species of the evening. This is the chipping sparrow. The chipping sparrow is really only found for the most part in the southwest of the island of Newfoundland. So if you're anywhere sort of north of the Corduroy Valley, you're probably not going to come across the chipping sparrow. And it's a pretty distinct looking sparrow, all things considered. If you take a look at the breast and belly, it's unmarked pale gray. So there's no markings, no streakings, nothing like that. It's quite pale. If you look at the picture on the right-hand side, you'll see the back is brown, sort of streaky. But the important thing to note for chipping sparrows is this rufous crown, as well as a black eye line that goes all the way from the back of the head all the way up to the bill. So it goes in front of the eye as well as behind the eye. And then they have a dark gray bill. They also have sort of this dark section, excuse me, a sort of dark section at the forehead area at the front of the crown stripes. Chipping sparrows are found in the forests as well as towns, so they can be associated with sort of any trees along the streets of towns, but it does favor conifer trees when they're available, which isn't usually a problem here in Newfoundland. But there is more deciduous trees in the southwest, of course, so that's where we're looking for chipping sparrows. Okay, we'll move on to the American tree sparrow. You'll notice maybe right off the bat that instead of that sort of clean, really pale breast and belly, we have kind of a rufous or reddish wash to it. There's two pictures here, but the male and female both look the same again. And it also has a dark central spot on the breast there. A really important thing for the American tree sparrow, if you can get a good look at their face, is that they have a bicolor bill. So the bottom is orange and the top is dark, and they're the only sparrow species in Newfoundland that has that bill color. So if you can get a good look at their face and you see that, you'll know it's definitely an American tree sparrow. Otherwise, they are sort of gray and rufous colored. So they have this gray face, they have a rufous stripe through the eye and a rufous crown. And then if you look at their wings, they have two bright white wing bars that are quite prominent. Okay, so American tree sparrows are not super common in Newfoundland. We can sometimes see them throughout the winter, so they don't fly south necessarily. And they like to live in open shrubby kind of habitat. Or tundra areas with just some shrubs and open areas. And because of that, they're mostly found on the Northern Peninsula, up in the highlands. But again, we can sometimes see them more widespread in the winter. Okie dokie. We'll move on now to the Savannah sparrow. The first thing you might notice about the Savannah sparrow is that it has this bright yellow patch in front of the eyes in that lower section. And that's a really good mark for the Savannah sparrow. There's only one other species here that has that yellow in front of the eye. So that in combination with these other marks can bring you to Savannah sparrow. You'll see on the undersides, they have a white belly and pale all the way up the breast and sides, but they have fine streaking, fine brown streaking along the chest area and down the sides as well. And sometimes you can see that sort of conglomerates into a smudgy kind of spot in the center of the breast. If you look back up to their head, you'll see that the yellow, of course, as I mentioned, and you'll see that they have a brown and white striped head with this whitish median crown stripe. Missing anything? Oh yes, the bill color is pink for Savannah Sparrow with some sort of dark edging. But again, you need to get a really good close look at that to see that properly. Savannah Sparrows, as their name suggests, really like open grassy areas. So in Newfoundland, we'll find them in bogs a lot of the time or in tundra. So they like grassy or open areas with small shrubs as well that they'll sit on top of and sing. And the Savannah Sparrow is found throughout Newfoundland, and they're quite a common species in these open areas. You might have heard one before, and I will play their song for you now. I think they say kind of their name. They say, Savannah. You'll see if you can hear that. Oh, it's not playing. Okay. Here we go. So it's almost a little bit insect-like in the quality. Let it sing once more. Okay, so that's the Savannah Sparrow. Our next sparrow is the song sparrow. The song sparrow is usually found a lot of the time near some water, so near ponds or streams. They definitely need shrubs as well. And they're not super common in Newfoundland, but they are found sort of widespread around the island, just not in really big numbers. And they're often associated with towns as well. So when we take a look at their markings here, we'll see that again, we have a white belly, we have a white breast and sides, but it has this sort of heavy brown streaking on it. You can see, especially on the picture on the bottom right there, that it's like quite heavy, sort of like really broad brush strokes if you had some brown paint. We have a face that's really got a lot of stripes. So they have a really dark malar stripe, which is that one that goes down from that borders the throat. So it's bordering a white throat. It has also a mustachioal stripe, and it has an eye line, and it has brown and gray crown stripes. So it has stripes sort of all on every level of the face. The back is sort of streaky brown again. That's not really super helpful, but this sort of face pattern with that really dark malar stripe is quite helpful. And a lot of the streaking sort of conglomerates into a dark central spot again here on the song sparrow. But you'll note sort of that doesn't have any yellow by the eyes, and the stripe doesn't go all the way from the bill, or all the way from the bill to the eye, as well as to the back of the head. It's just behind the eye. Okay, we'll move on now to the Lincoln sparrow. The Lincoln sparrow, I think of it as sort of like a dignified looking sparrow. It's really like crisp in all of its markings. So if you look at the streaking on its breast and sides, you'll see that they're really fine and like distinct and dark compared to the browns that we've seen so far. And so that's a really good mark for the Lincoln sparrow. If you look at the picture on the top left, you'll also be able to see that they have that really white belly, and then they have this buffy sort of beigey brown color along the chest and the sides, and it's quite distinct compared to that white of the belly. We haven't seen really the species so far having that buffy wash that's in such contrast to the belly. The markings on the face of the Lincoln sparrow are not nearly as vibrant, I guess, as the song sparrow that we just saw, for example. Doesn't have really much of a malar stripe. But you'll see it does have this broad gray eyebrow that it goes all the way from the bill all the way to the back of the head. And they do have sort of this lighter buffy color eye ring that goes all the way around the eye. The Lincoln sparrow is another species that you can find in sort of open or edge areas where there's thick shrubs, but also open areas. So we can see that again a lot of the time near the edges of bogs, or if there's some shrubs within a bog, then you could get a Lincoln sparrow there. And they're found all across Newfoundland, except for not very much on the Avalon, if really ever. So if you're on the Avalon, you might not have come across a Lincoln sparrow, but anywhere else on the island, they are around. Okie dokie. Here we have the swamp sparrow. We'll just talk about his name right now, swamp sparrow. So you would expect that he lives in really wet areas, and this is well named. You will find swamp sparrows associated with water. They are found all across Newfoundland as well in these sort of brushy wetland kind of areas. You can even find them in sort of those older swamps along the sides of the road as well. So when we take a look at this sparrow, it's a little bit more reddish color than the ones we've been looking at. I know a lot of this is really relative, and sparrows are really very difficult. So if you're feeling dismayed about how similar they look, they do take some time, and you just have to look at a lot of them. But hopefully some of this information is helping tonight. So the swamp sparrow is a little bit darker. They have sort of this clean gray colored breast in the summer. In the winter, or sort of in the late or in the fall, there might be a little bit of streaking in there, but in the summertime it'll be clean and gray. And you can see the white throat sort of contrasts with the color of the breast and belly. So the white throat there really stands out. Their bill is yellow at the base, sort of darker, but it's kind of a gradient, I guess. And a really good mark for the swamp sparrow is this bright rufous crown that really stands out. Sometimes they have it like standing up a little bit if they're really agitated. And it's really this vibrant color compared to sort of all the other species that we've talked about. They don't really have that red on the top of the head other than the chipping sparrow, which is unlikely to be seen. The rest of the face is gray, and we do have this dark eye line going behind the eye, this sort of brownish cheek patch, and then the moustachial stripe coming down from the bill. The back of the bird and the wings, or especially the wings, I guess, are also rufous. So we have these bright rufous wings and this bright rufous crown, and that makes a swamp sparrow look more distinct than some of the others. However, the fox sparrow is a good one for being able to tell apart from some of these other little brown birds that we've looked at just now. The fox sparrow generally is larger, it's pretty chunky bird, and you can see it's mostly this like gray combined with this really bright rufous or rusty color. So you can see they have bright rufous wings and tail. And if we look to the head, they have a big gray eyebrow as well as a gray nape of the neck. And then along the breast and belly, we have really vibrant white, but it's splattered with these big splotches of rufous as well. So it's basically white, rufous, and gray. And that's all of the colors of the fox sparrow. Fox sparrows, again, are found all across Newfoundland, and they like regenerating forests where they can have some bare ground that they can use for kicking around, finding insects. And they also go to areas near bogs where there's some low scrubby forest as well. But fox sparrows can be pretty widespread. The white-crowned sparrow that we have here, on the other hand, is not very widespread. This is another species that is found really just at the northern tip of the northern peninsula. So if you're anywhere else in Newfoundland, you won't come across the white-crowned sparrow. It nests in open areas with stunted trees or up near the tree line. So it's really, we're at the southern edge of their range here, which is why they're not super common across the whole island. So when we take a look at their markings, the best thing to note for the white-crowned sparrow is the markings on the head. So we have this really vibrant black and white crown stripes with no other color, which is important to note compared to the next species we're going to look at. So there's no other color but black and white on the head, the broad white eyebrow, black and white crown stripes, that black eye line. They have an orange bill, a white throat, and they're sort of gray all over the rest of the underparts. And then they have sort of a pale brown back and wings with 2 white wing bars. So again, note the colors of the head here, and they don't have any color but black and white on the face. Okay, we'll look at the next species, which is the white-throated sparrow. And you'll see again, we have these really distinct black and white stripes on the head. However, you also have this bright yellow patch in the lores, that section right behind the bill. So if you're getting those 2 species confused, remember the yellow is for white-throated sparrow and no yellow for white-crowned sparrow. White-throated sparrows have a very distinct white throat. Thank you for naming them correctly, people who name them. And it looks so distinct because it has sort of a very distinct line where it meets the breast and belly. So the breast and belly is clean gray all the way down, and that white throat really stands out. Again, we have black and white stripes on the head, a big white eyebrow, and on the back, there's sort of this dark rufous color with a little bit of white in the wings, but not necessarily a full wing bar. A really cool thing to note is that you might think I have a female up here on the right, but actually the picture up on the top right is, well, we don't know what sex either of these birds are in these pictures. Males and females look the same, but there is 2 different color forms. So there's the white color form that is in the main picture, and then there's the tan color form, which is in the top right little inset picture. And so both males and females could be either form. It doesn't have anything to do with age or sex or location. It's just a genetic thing. And it's really interesting because males of both of the different colors prefer females of the white colors, and the females of both colors prefer the tan males. But actually the white striped color is more aggressive than the tan color. So typically they would get their way or their choice when they're looking for mates. And so we often end up with a mated pair where there's 1 tan color and 1 white color. So you can take a look for that if you come across some white-throated sparrows this summer. This is another song that you maybe have heard. They're really common. White-throated sparrows are really common across Newfoundland in quite large numbers. They're one of our most common sparrows. And so you might have heard their song before. I'll play it for you now. Sorry, that was really loud. Hopefully I didn't deafen anyone. I got a little funny at the end there. So maybe you've heard that song before. People describe it as, "Oh, sweet Canada, Canada, Canada," or "Oh, Canada, Canada, Canada." And their song is actually changing sort of as we speak. It's evolving. And the version that you heard just now is sort of the original song. But it's actually changing, starting from Western Canada and moving east. And I think last summer I may have heard one of the new song in Newfoundland. And so they've started sort of taking 1 syllable out. in this new song format that's coming through. So now instead of saying, oh, Canada, 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 now they say, oh, Canna, Canna, Canna. So they take out one of the syllables. And that's a change that's sort of happening right now in white-throated sparrow songs. And it's, yeah, really cool to see that sort of change in action here. Maybe there'll be more of them singing that song in Newfoundland this year. Okay, this is our second last sparrow before we move on to the finches. So this is the dark-eyed junco. Likely, if any of you have feeders up in the winter, you've probably seen these guys. They stick around all year. They are also, thankfully, more distinct looking than these other sparrows we've seen so far. So we're talking about a fully gray and white bird. The male here is in the main picture and the female is up on the top right. They do look pretty similar, but the female has a little bit more brown tint on her. So the male is sort of a glossier, more vibrant gray on top, or slate gray, and the female will have a little bit of brown mixed in. That can be a little bit tricky to tell. So we have a bird that's gray on the top, white on the bottom, and then they have these really vibrant white outer tail feathers. And if you see them fly away, you can see that flashing really easily, those couple outer tail feathers being fully white compared to the middle ones that are this dark gray. And they have a cute little pink bill, just to finish off their look. In North America, there's actually 6 subspecies of dark-eyed juncos. And in Newfoundland, we have the one that's called slate-colored, which I guess is because it looks like a slate chalkboard, I guess. The others do have different colorations, but we only get the the slate-colored junco in Newfoundland. But the species name is dark-eyed junco. Juncos live all across Newfoundland. They're happy in remote areas as well as closer to towns, and they prefer coniferous forest. Okay, this is our last sparrow for the evening. And if you're looking in a field guide, this sparrow will not be anywhere near the other ones we've seen already, because this is actually a old world sparrow that was introduced from Europe. So it's usually at the very back of a field guide in the introduced species section. They came to North America in the 1850s, and they're now found literally everywhere. This past summer, we went to some remote areas with resettled communities where there's nobody living and there's nothing in the middle of that community, and settled communities, and there were still house sparrows there. It's crazy how they get everywhere. So this is one that you've probably seen around town. They nest in cavities, so they'll tuck themselves in behind, if there's a little gap in the siding, they'll tuck themselves in behind there, or in the eaves, that sort of thing. And so they're really associated with human settlement and houses, which is, helpful since their name is house sparrow. So the male here is in the main picture, the female's on the top right. She is sort of this gray-brown, kind of all over, not too many markings to note. The male is actually quite stunning on the bottom here. He's pale underneath. He has a black throat and a pale cheek, which are have quite distinct from each other, and then a black throat that goes all the way down through the chest. On top of the head, he has a gray crown and then a chestnut patch behind the eye, and all of those colors are quite bright. And then the back is sort of a streaked rufous and black. So these are ones you've probably seen around, even if you didn't know what they were. And that's the end of the sparrow. So we'll move on now to the finches and grosbeaks. Another note about where you'll find things in a field guide. We actually have 3 species we're talking about tonight that have grosbeak in their name, but you won't find them together because they're actually in 2 different families. So we have the rose-breasted grosbeak, which is in the family Cardinalidae. And then we have the pine grosbeak and the evening grosbeak, which are actually finches, which is the family Fringillidae. So if you can't find them near each other in the field guide, that's why you just need to look in the index probably to find what you're looking for. When we're talking about the finches, finches and grosbeaks, they can vary quite widely in size, as well as size of the bill. So that's something that we'll pay attention to as we go through these species. There's more than just these 3 that we're going to talk about. But we'll start off with the rose-breasted grosbeak before we get into the finches. So the rose-breasted grosbeak is it will be found on its own in the field guide. And the male and female look different. So the males here, this black and white one, and the females down on the bottom, the brown one. And in Newfoundland, we don't have any, or as far as I know, any known breeding records for this species, but we do every year have both males and females arrive in the spring, and males are often singing, and so it is possible, but just nobody has recorded it yet, or maybe it hasn't happened yet. They actually like deciduous forest, so they're not really common even when they arrive, and yeah, so if you have them singing in the middle of a spruce woods, it's likely not breeding there, but but it could be if you find them in the middle of a maple stand. So this is a pretty large bird. They're just a little bit smaller than a robin. If we look at the bill, you'll see that they have this really thick pink bill. It's very sturdy. This is another species that is crushing seeds open, so it needs to get through that shell. So they have this really thick bill. If we look at the male, he's very distinct looking. He has a black head and back, and then he has a white rump, sort of that patch above the tail, as well as a bright white belly, and has these white patches on the wings. You'll also note this vibrant red triangle that goes sort of in a bit of a teardrop shape down the breast. And we don't have a picture of him flying, but if we saw underneath his wings, he would also have vibrant red underneath the wing. The female down here on the bottom is brown overall, but she's darker on the back and has a pale white or sort of cream colored belly with streaking on it. She has white wing bars, and if you look to the face, you'll see, of course, that same thick, sturdy bill, and you'll note that she has a really strong white eyebrow. It goes all the way from the bill down the back of the neck, and it's really quite vibrant. We'll compare her to another species later on, but that's the female rose-breasted grosbeak. Okay, we'll move on to the finches, which is the rest of the species for tonight. So this is the family Fringillidae, and I think this is maybe all of the species shown on the slide here that we'll look at. So as I started to mention earlier, we have a wide variety of bill shapes for the finches, and so the shape of the bill is going to be really important for identifying or help identifying the species. As well, we have a lot of different colors. If we look at them when they're flying, you'll see that they sort of have an undulating flight, so they dip down and go up a crest and dip down and go up a crest. So that's something to notice if they're flying by and you see that that sort of flight style. It could be a finch. Typically, the males are quite colorful and the females are duller, so we do have some sexual dimorphism for the finches, and they are often found quite high up in trees, sort of at the tippy tops rather than down on the ground, although there's a couple of exceptions, which you can see here, I guess. But they are often quite high up. And a lot of these species will visit feeders as well. So if you have feeders up in the winter, you might have gotten some of these species too. Finches, yeah, will stick around in Newfoundland in the winter. And they join into big flocks usually, and they're moving around where resources are. And so their population can appear to widely vary, but they're often just sort of moving around the landscape in large numbers. So the first finch that we'll go through is the evening grosbeak. So it's not a grosbeak, it's a finch, even though its name is evening grosbeak. The evening grosbeak can be found across Newfoundland, but its numbers are not really high. It's not super common, and it's actually listed as vulnerable on the island here. We have the male in the bottom picture and the female up on the top right. So we'll talk about the male first. As you can see, we'll talk about the bill again first, since I wanted to note that. We have, again, this really large pale bill that can be really easily used for crushing open big seeds. So it's very hefty bill. The male has a bright yellow eyebrow, looks almost like a check mark in this picture. And that's in contrast to sort of the dark chestnut brown of the head. Then he also has a bright yellow body, goes all the way into above and below the tail. And then his primary feathers, which are the outer flight feathers, you can see folded up here, are really sleek and black. And then he has, oops, I changed the page, sorry. Okay, and then he has these big white patches of secondary feathers on the wings there, folded up. So this huge white patch. The female here on the top right is sort of a muted version of that. There can be varying amounts of yellow on the female. So this one has not really a lot of yellow, but she does have a little greenish on the nape of the neck. But otherwise, they have sort of a gray-brown body, a little bit of a lighter breast and belly, but not too much different. We have that same bill shape, but it's a little bit of a different color. And then if we look to the wings and tail, we still have black wings and tail, but instead of that huge white patch, we have just sort of white patches on the wings instead. Okay, now we'll actually go to the next slide. This is the American goldfinch. The American goldfinch is found across the island as well. It's not quite as common in the north because they are a little bit associated more with deciduous trees. And they also do like younger forests, so they're often near towns as well. And they are quite a bit of a smaller bird. So if you're thinking like a lot of people might call them a canary, if you're thinking that size, that's sort of the size we're talking about as well. We have the male here on the bottom and the female up on the top right. So the male on the bottom is sort of bright yellow with, well, sort of bright yellow and a dark black. So bright yellow body, and then he has a black forehead, as well as black wings and tail, and then white wing bar as well. And then they have this sort of orange bill. The female is up there on the top. She's sort of a dusky brown or has some yellowish wash on the body sometimes, and is paler underneath. And then she also has black wings with white wing bars, but it's not quite as glossy as the male as well. And in the summer, you can't really tell, or you can't really mistake the male and the female. But in the winter right now, if you have goldfinches coming to your feeders, the males will actually take on a plumage that looks a lot like the females. So it can be quite a bit difficult, more difficult to tell them apart in the winter time. Okay. We'll go on to the pine siskin now. The pine siskin is around the same size as the goldfinch, and in a lot of the ways can look a little bit similar, except for they have a really streaky body. They have streaks sort of all over, on the back, on the head, and on the breast and belly. So that's a really good thing to note for the pine siskin. And also take a look at that bill. It's really sharp and slender. It's almost like a needle. or like a fat needle, and that's really distinct for the pine siskin. I have a picture on the top right and the main picture here. The males and females look pretty similar. I don't think that I would be confident to tell them apart. Males can have more yellow, but that's really variable. And a lot of older females can also have more yellow. So typically the sexes look the same for pine siskin. So as you can see, you know, we have variable amounts of yellow, and that can be due to age as well, or genetics, or how much resources or food resources they have, that sort of thing. So they have yellow patches on the wing as well as on the edge of the tail, and sometimes the flight feathers are also edged in yellow if they're a really fancy one. Pine siskins are found in open coniferous forests or younger mixed forests, and so they're eating little seeds as well, and they really, really like the cones of alder shrubs in the winter. So you could see like a whole group of them sometimes descending on some alder shrubs. They'll also come to feeders as well, as you can see in this next picture where there's a whole pile of them. This was up in Rocky Harbor. And this is just to show you sort of the yellow patches in the wing and tail when they're in flight. So if you see that, if you see some birds flying by and they have this big white or big yellow patches in the wing and tail, and they're flying with an undulating flight up and down, then it's a pine siskin. Okie dokie. So we'll move on to the common redpoll. I have the male on the left there and the female on the right. As you can see, they look pretty similar. The only difference really is that the male on the left has a little bit of a red wash on the breast and sort of around the face or the cheeks, I guess. And the female doesn't have that red color on the breast. Both the male and female have a red patch on the forehead, sort of like they shoved their face in like a bowl of paint. They have a stubby yellow bill. It's also quite sharp. And otherwise, they're sort of a mix of pale underneath and a light brown with streaks on the back, both the male and the female. This is, again, a pretty small bird. We're talking just probably a little bit bigger than a goldfinch. And so they're feeding a lot on seeds of, you know, small shrubs and wildflowers, grasses, that sort of thing. Common redpolls are found across Newfoundland, but not quite as much in the southwest. And they enjoy living in coniferous and mixed forests, but they are sort of reliant on the seed supply from different vegetation species. Oh, and I forgot to mention this really distinct sort of black around the bill. That's a really good mark for the common redpoll. That's sort of like black, I don't know, looks like they have a beard or something. That goes all the way around the bill and up by the eyes. It's a little bit less distinct in the female there. Okay. Our next species is the purple finch. The purple finch is more of like a raspberry red color. The male there is on the bottom. The female's up on the top right in a circle. So the male is a sort of raspberry red all over the body, belly, and head. So you can see that color sort of all over, even on the top of the tail and underneath the tail as well. Outside of Newfoundland, there's another species called the house finch, which looks very similar, but the amount of red and the locations of the red is different. But the purple finch is all over this raspberry red. Take a look at the bill there. We have a heavy triangular bill. It's not like very small and pointed like the pine siskin that we were just looking at, or the redpoll, sort of a more all-purpose kind of sturdy bill. The female up here on the right is sort of brown streaky overall. So she's brown on the back and pale underneath with brown streaks. And you'll see that she has a white eyebrow but it's a little bit muted. It's not very strong. It's not very distinct. And that's something that I mentioned I would compare for you with the rose-breasted grosbeak again. So I just put up the female rose-breasted grosbeak, and we have the female purple finch on the top. And so you can see they look really quite similar. Luckily, you're more likely to see the purple finch, so the confusion can be minimal. But if you are unsure, one thing that's really good to take a look at is that eyebrow. So the rose-breasted grosbeak, the eyebrow is really, really distinct. It really stands out from the color surrounding it on the head and cheek, whereas the purple finch eyebrow is a little bit more muted. It's a little bit more blurred in with the colors surrounding it. If you also look at the wings, the purple finch doesn't have any wing bars. There's no pale white on the wing, no colors, but the rose-breasted grosbeak has 2 white wing bars. So that's another good difference to look at. And then finally, the shape and color of the bill is different as well between the purple finch and the rose-breasted grosbeak. Also, the rose-breasted grosbeak wants deciduous forest. The purple finch wants typically coniferous forest. Okay. We have another sort of red bird here, the pine grosbeak. People call them mopes as well, because they're pretty sort of tame. They're often found sitting on the ground. They're not really shy. You can walk up pretty close to them usually, and they don't startle away. And they seem to kind of move kind of slowly a little bit and mope around, hence their nickname there. So males and females, again, look different. The male down on the bottom is sort of pinkish red all over, mottled in with some gray feathers as well. And so there can be a varying amount of the pink versus the gray. You'll see that the pine grosbeak there, he has black wings and a white wing bar. And there's a pale gray arc under the eye. You can see that on the female as well there in the top right. And then they have a short, heavy, curved bill. It's just a little bit down curved at the tip, but that shape is there and distinct. So good thing to look at when you're taking a peek at these birds. The female up here on the right is sort of gray all over, but she can have varying amounts of greenish yellow mixed in as well. So the rump patch or above the tail there, the rump is yellow as well as on the top of the head, but the rest of the body can also get some of that color too. Again, we have that pale gray arc under the eye, which makes the eye look really deeply inset, and that same shape of the bill that we talked about just now. The shape of their heads actually also looks a little bit flattened, like there's not a lot of feathers sticking up on top. It's sort of a flat slope on top of the head rather than rounded, which is what we see in a lot of the other species. Pine grosbeaks can be found sort of all over the place. They are comfortable near towns as well as in more remote areas, and they like open black spruce forest nearby bogs and wetlands and tuckamore as well, but I've sort of seen them all over the place in Newfoundland. Okay. We have another species here where we have males and females looking different, with the male being red and the female sort of this grayish, yellowy kind of thing. So this is the white-winged crossbill. The next species we'll talk about is the red crossbill. And so we have these 2 species of crossbill in Newfoundland. And the crossbill is a really great thing to notice on these birds. So take a good look, if you can, at the shape of that bill on both the male and the female. It's maybe a little hard to tell with the female, the background, but they actually have their bill is crossed over. The upper and lower mandible is crossed over. And they use that as a special feeding style where they're feeding on conifer cones, like you can see in the picture here of the male. So they actually open the beak a little bit so that the tips are the tips of the top and bottom are sort of even with each other. They slide their beak in between the scales of the cone, and then they close it again, and then the tips of the beak sort of pry open the scales of the cone so they can go in and get out the little seed that's inside. And so it's a really cool foraging strategy that all the crossbills use because of this specialized beak structure that they have. Because of that specialized structure, they are they're solely dependent on conifer trees for food. And so the crossbills will actually forage widely across Newfoundland and across sort of the boreal forest of North America. And they are moving along to where there's these big productions of cones on the conifer trees. So if you've ever noticed, some years seem to have a lot of cones dripping off of the evergreen trees. That's because they actually produce their seeds in what's called masting cycles. And so they produce a lot of seeds in one year in a effort to sort of have at least some of them survive and not be eaten to produce new trees. And so you'll have these huge crops of conifer cones some years, and then you'll have not very many other years. And so the crossbills will move around following this abundance of food as the years go by. And because of that, they actually can breed sort of almost any time of the year. As long as there's a cone crop wherever they are with enough abundance to raise their young, they can actually breed throughout the winter into the fall. They can also breed in the summer as well. So it's really cool to watch and see what the crossbills are doing. We've had quite a lot of them in Newfoundland, I think this fall. Catherine can correct me if I'm wrong. And so I think we must have had some breeding this fall because there was so many conifers around with cones. Okay, so let's take a look at the white-winged crossbill here specifically. We have, of course, that crossed bill. The male here in the middle is this red all along the top of the body, gray along the undersides near the tail, with these really vibrant black wings with white wing bars. The white-winged crossbill, so he has white on the wings. You'll also see at the back of the face, you'll see this sort of dark crescent near the back of the cheek. And that's a good thing to note for the white-winged crossbill and also to compare to those other red species that we've just been looking at. None of them had that sort of dark crescent. The female up here on the top right is a bit more muted. She is gray with some yellowish green coloration mixed in. And the amount of color can vary a lot between individuals. So some are quite gray and some are more yellow. And that's just a variation between each bird. But they have this yellow rump. They have, again, the black wings with the white wing bars, the white-winged crossbill. And she also has that dark crescent to the back of the cheek, but it's a little bit less muted than the male. Okay, so we'll go on to our next species, the red crossbill. This is the last one for the evening. The red crossbill, since it's a crossbill, has that very specific bill structure again. So it's a little bit easier to see in these pictures compared to the last slide. So they have that crossed over upper and bottom mandible. The male here is on the bottom again, and he's this sort of vibrant red. The amount of red can sometimes vary as well, and sometimes there's some greenish feathers scattered in for the male. And instead of black wings, we have brown wings, and we do not have any white on this bird. So that's how you can tell the red crossbill and the white-winged crossbill apart, by that white wing bars on the white-winged crossbill, no wing bars on the red crossbill. The female is up here on the right, and she has a sort of greenish-brown body, Not really much markings to speak of. And again, we can have a little bit of variation in how much green or yellow feathers that she has. But this one here is quite a mostly brown individual. Red crossbills are also listed in Newfoundland. So you can sometimes get them to your feeders in the winter, but the rest of the year, they're often quite hard to find. And they also like pine trees a lot, which there isn't quite a lot of in Newfoundland, red pine specifically. And so we don't come across red crossbills too often in the summertime. So if you find one, do let us know. Okay, so that was our last species for the evening. As usual, we have a little bit of a skill testing questions here at the end, just for fun, of course. Anonymous through a poll, and I will hopefully get them to work out tonight. So here's our first species, and I'll get your options up here. Okay, so which species is this bird? I can see answers coming in, so you must be able to see it, which is great. See, most people have their answers in, but if the remaining few want to get your answers in, I'll close it in 10 seconds or so. Okay, I'm going to close this up, and I will share the answers with you. Okay, so we have, most folks are saying American goldfinch, and that is correct. This is a bright yellow male American goldfinch in his stunning breeding plumage. So the other options people answered were pine siskin and evening grosbeak. The male evening grosbeak is also yellow all over, but he has a really big, heavy bill instead of this pointed little one. And instead of having this black and yellow patterning, he has sort of a bright yellow check mark kind of eyebrow over the eye. The pine siskin also does have a very sharp pointed bill like this, but they're sort of brown and streaky all over with not a lot of yellow except in the wing and the tail. Okay. Let's go on to our next one here. Okay, who is this species? Just leave it open for 10 more seconds or so. I think most people have got their answers in. Okay, I'll close that up. And here's the results. So we have a bit of a three-way split, sort of. Nobody said common redpoll, which is great. They are the ones that have that bright red patch on the forehead. We have white-throated sparrow, white-crowned sparrow, and Savannah sparrow here as options. Remember this yellow patch above the beak is only in the white-throated sparrow and the Savannah sparrow. So the white-crowned sparrow does have those black and white stripes on the head, but doesn't have any yellow at all. So we'll eliminate that one. The white-throated sparrow and the Savannah sparrow both have that yellow in the face, but the Savannah sparrow doesn't have this vibrant white throat that is contrasting or with this big distinct change into the breast and belly So this is a white-throated sparrow that we have here. The Savannah sparrow would also have a lot more streaking on the sides and the breast as well. Okie dokie. Let's go on to our next one. Here we are. Here's your options. Who's this one here? The answers are coming in quick for this one. I love this picture. He's collecting some tasty snacks. Okay, I'll close it in 5 seconds. Okie dokie. Perfect. Okay, so we had nearly everybody say dark-eyed junco. This is a dark-eyed junco. So you see it's the slate gray color on the back, bright white on the bottom, and those white outer tail feathers. Perfect dark-eyed junco. The pine siskin is mostly brown and streaky all over, and it has a really sharp pointed bill. Okay, well done. We'll move on to our fourth question. I think there's maybe 8. And here's your options. Who is this bird? Wow, we have lots of answers already. I'll just close it in 5 seconds or so. Okay. Very nice. Okay, so we have the most majority says common redpoll, which is correct. This is I would say even a male common redpoll because that little bit of red wash on the breast there, although there's not a lot of black around the face, so maybe I shouldn't say, but it is a common redpoll nonetheless, because we have that bright red patch on the face, not much color other than brown and white everywhere else. The pine grosbeak, the male at least, would be sort of reddish color all over, and the female would be not having any red at all. So that does leave us with the common redpoll here. Okie dokie. And we do have a different shaped bill, of course. Grosbeak has that big chunky bill, and the redpoll has this pointed bill. Okie dokie. Let's move on to our next one here. Okay. Which species do we have now? Okay, I'll just leave it up in 5 more seconds. Okay. Share that with you. So we have evening grosbeak and pine grosbeak as our potential answers here, which I really like that because we have definitely this big fat grosbeak bill. So that's great that you picked that out. It is an evening grosbeak, so it's a male with this brilliant yellow eyebrow and yellow along the body with those black wings and the big white wing patches. The pine grosbeak male would be sort of that bright raspberry red at the top, but they also do have black wings, but they have those white wing bars, and the females are sort of brown and streaky. So this is an evening grosbeak, a really lovely male. Okie dokie. Here's our next one. Number 6. Who do we have here with this big fat mouthful of food for its babies? It's a good parent. This is a little bit trickier because we just have a lot of brown and white going on in this bird, don't we? I'll close it up in 10 seconds. Okay, I'll end this now and share. So we have a little bit of a mixed bag of what people thought about this. One really good thing to note is this yellow on the face here. So again, the only 2 species that we have that have the yellow on the face from the sparrows are the Savannah sparrow and the white-throated sparrow. So we can eliminate the song sparrow and the Lincoln sparrow for that. But that is difficult because we do have these sort of heavy streaking on the breast and belly, the breast and sides, which you can find on the song sparrow. The Lincoln sparrow also does have those streaks and is sort of brown and pale. The streaks are a bit finer, but they are there. But this yellow on the face makes us have a Savannah sparrow or a white-throated sparrow. It is a Savannah sparrow. And it's a little bit hard to see the throat, I guess, in this picture because it's sort of covered up a little bit by all of these bugs. But the white-throated sparrow also has those black and white crown stripes. And so this bird instead has that brown crown stripes. And so that makes this a Savannah sparrow. That's a tricky one. Okay. Very good. And let's go on to this little guy here. I almost launched the wrong questions. Okay. Who is this little fellow or lady? We don't know. Sparrows can be pretty confusing. Get your answers in if you want to take a guess. Leave it open for 10 more seconds. Okay, I'll close this up. Most people have answered. Okay, so nobody answered white-throated sparrow, which is great. We just talked about how they have yellow on the face and black and white stripes, so that's wonderful. So we have chipping sparrow, swamp sparrow, and American tree sparrow. And I gave you all those options because they're difficult. Okay, so we do have a swamp sparrow here. This is a swamp sparrow. We can eliminate chipping sparrow because They are sort of a crisp gray underneath. They don't really have any brown in them, and they actually have an eye line that goes all the way from the bill to the back of the head, rather than just being behind the eye. And they don't really have any of this like other facial markings other than that rusty cap. The American tree sparrow, this was a really small note, but if you remember, they are the ones that have the bicolored bill. So American tree sparrow would be having a dark upper bill and a pale underbill. So if you notice that, you would know this is not an American tree sparrow. They also have a dark spot at the center of the breast, and they actually have white wing bars as well. So that would be an American tree sparrow, but this is a swamp sparrow. He has that rusty cap, those bright rusty wings, and sort of grayish kind of elsewhere, with a pale breast and belly. Okay, we have one more. Our final question here is this one. So who do we have here? I'll leave it open for just a couple more seconds. I think most people have answered. 100% participation. What a way to end the evening. Amazing. Okay. Okay, so nobody said pine grosbeak, which is good because he's not a pine grosbeak. We have most people saying white-winged crossbill, which is correct. This is a male white-winged crossbill. If you take a look at the beak, you can see pretty well those two mandibles that are crossed over at the tip there, which makes him a crossbill, which would mean he's a white-winged crossbill or a red crossbill. And of course, we have those big white patches on the wings. There's two white wing bars, which means he can't be a red crossbill because they have more brown wings with no markings on them. The purple finch would not have that crossed bill. The male would have this sort of coloration. He wouldn't have that black mark behind the cheek. And he also would have sort of brownish wings as well, rather than this vibrant black, and doesn't have any wing bars either. So we have here our male white-winged crossbill. I'm so glad that everybody got their answer in. Wonderful. Okay, so that is the end of our little polls for the evening. And I just want to thank you all for coming out tonight and learning about our sparrows and finches and grosbeaks with me. And I hope that this can clear up a little bit of the difficulty with them. I'm happy to take any questions if anyone wants to unmute and ask, or if there's anything that's popped up in the chat. But again, thank you all for hanging out tonight again.
Hi, Jenna. Thanks for a great job as always. So far, I'm just seeing thank yous coming in to the chat. And a couple people did message me privately to say that they have indeed seen lots of white-winged crossbills this year. Okay, so yeah, you are right on target. I've seen lots too. Every time I go to Buttercup Park to go skiing, they're all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really fun to see them going around in their feeding flocks, making a bit of a ruckus.
Absolutely. And you've got somebody here remarking that juncos are sparrows. Who knew? And I agree. I also did not know that until I started looking at the field guide and thought, wait a minute, what?
It's true. Surprise. They're like the only one that doesn't have sparrow in their name.
Yep.
Yep.
I should mention also, Jenna, that there were some questions about whether you were going to do songs for sparrows, and obviously you were a little pushed for time tonight. But I think at least a couple of those species that we didn't get to today are covered in the Birding by Ear webinar, which is our last webinar of the session. So make sure to come out to that one, particularly for the song of the fox sparrow, which is a personal favorite of mine, because to me, fox sparrows sound completely drunk, and that makes me really happy out in the field. So
yeah, that's true. And if anyone is looking to listen to some songs this winter, you can always use online resources. You can look things up on the Cornell Lab of Ornithology online, or they have an app called Merlin that you can listen to songs in as well, which can be fun to think of the summer while we're in the winter.
it's coming, Jenna. I realize that
No, I heard
the
some
85 centimeters of snow in St. John's may not make you think that, but
I heard some juncos like singing away yesterday. Yeah, it's coming.
Oh, and we've got a comment here from John about a huge flock of about 45 plus evening grosbeaks in Pasadena.
Wow.
So that's really interesting, and I'd love to know if they're sticking around the area because, as Jenna mentioned, that is one of our species at risk in Newfoundland, and so we are particularly interested in finding out where they are.
It's true.
Yes, and Daniel, you are correct. Daniel said that iBird is good as well as Merlin, and it is, but iBird is a paid subscription and Merlin is free.
Yeah,
but they're both very good.
they are. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it. So thank you again, Jenna, for doing a fantastic job. Thank you all for coming out tonight. And next week we are doing the rather vaguely named other passerines, which basically just means everything we haven't covered so far, except for species at risk, which have their own webinar. So join us next Monday, and we will talk about fun things like swallows and horned larks and all kinds of wonderful spring birds.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks all for coming out, and we will see you hopefully next week.
See you next